So this is my issue, and this is why I connected Bill Cosby to Thomas Sowell. He puts forth a narrative that when black people act more like white people, they are more successful. I can't say this isn't true, but I can say it is a narrative that should not be the case. So the depictions within the Cosby Show were more white centric. There was very little Afrocentric narrative within that frame rate. So
How are
we
you
get back to
defining
his
white
character.
centric? How are you defining that? What does that mean? What does white centric and Afrocentric mean in these things? What were the white centric points of Cosby?
I'm talking Good Times versus Cosby Show.
Okay,
If we're
I've
gonna put
got
it
you.
in a narrative,
But you said specifically that Bill Cosby show was more white centric. So then my question is,
yes,
what was white centric about the
we're
Cosby show?
we're showing black professionals, so on and so forth. That wasn't viewed as a black thing at the time.
Okay, let me
They're
stop.
speaking
Wait,
in
okay,
proper
I
English.
got you. Let's stop right there. The first thing that you're saying, number one, are you saying that there were no black professionals at the time?
No, they weren't depicted in media.
Okay, but there were black professionals.
Of course, that wasn't a
Okay,
general understanding
got
of
you. So the
black
medium used to
society.
misrepresent us as all
And I'm
uneducated and
saying
not well
these are the
spoken. Hold
good
on, no, no,
things.
no. We're addressing the first thing
But
first. The first thing that you said was just about like the black professionalism. So again, if the media chooses to misrepresent all black people as unprofessional, right? That's not because Bill Cosby decides that he's going to host a show where he's specifically pushing against that sort of demonization by demonstrating that you can have a black family that is professional and not just working class, that can be upper class, as those things have always existed, or not always, but for at the time period, there was a significant portion of upper class black people. And he decided to demonstrate that that's not white centric. That was something that's just an American value that's class, that's a specific level of class which black people attain to as well. Then the next thing that you stated was well spoken. You understand I would be considered particularly well spoken, probably the most well spoken person on this platform anyway.
you
And
say things that would not be said on the Cosby Show.
of course I do. But my
Precisely the word that I advocate against.
right, I do say nigga quite a bit. But my point being
Cosby
that
wouldn't approve.
he sure wouldn't, but that doesn't mean that I'm not well spoken. Everyone can see that, right? So then my point being, just because Bill Cosby decided to be well spoken, that's not white centric. It's just educated and well spoken, which there were black lawyers at the time that were well spoken. Martin Luther King was very well spoken, right? Malcolm X was incredibly well spoken. Louis Farrakhan, incredibly well spoken, right? So there's always been these black leaders and black pastors and all of these people at the forefront of the civil rights movement and so on and so forth that have been incredibly well spoken. So Bill Cosby just chose to make a show in which very well educated upper class black people were well spoken, which seems pretty consistent with what those people were. That's not white centric. It's just showing a specific aspect of black culture that was distancing itself from the constant demonization by the media, where they were intentionally showing lower class black people, working class, and poverty stricken. That's not white centric.
I can see what you're saying in that sense, but I'm saying there was a negative of black euphemisms.
What does that mean?
The same way I touched on the point of the words that you say would not be allowed on the Cosby Show. This is
Mm-hmm.
not a genuine depiction of most black families. It was put in a certain way. And
Wait,
when anyone walked outside, go ahead.
but there were
I
plenty of
think
black families that don't say nigga. Like that wasn't a common thing. And furthermore, at that point in time, none of the black shows, including the working class shows, were talking about nigga at that time. Like that wasn't like a common thing that was shown on television. It was considered extremely taboo and only really like a proprietary piece of language. Specifically, what do we call those words? Not idioms. Gosh, we just looked it
Yes,
up.
it's idioms
Locution.
I'm looking
No, no,
for.
no, no, no. It's locution. It
Well,
was a
locution's
specific
fine as
locution.
well.
Right. It was a specific locution for black people. It was not something that was seen on television. It was not considered a good thing in that regard.
And there's specific
So why is that
locutions that were
problematic?
disregarded in this show.
So you're saying because he chose not to say nigga, which was not on
No,
any
not just
television
that
show,
word.
what other
I'm saying
locutions?
I'm saying other locutions, y'alls, and other things that are adapted to black culture
Which are
and the
like
way that
less
black
well
people
spoken,
speak.
sure.
I don't feel that's a less well-spoken trait.
It's improper English.
I agree.
Okay, so he did that so it would be less well
But it's
spoken.
locution.
Sure, but it's
It's been
improper
adapted
English.
and is now proper English.
You can have locutions that are still proper English, but this one, y'all, is specifically not well spoken and specifically improper English, and he wanted well spoken, well to do, upper class black people. Again, that's not whiteness.
Exactly.
That's
This
not
is
whiteness. That's not whiteness.
This is what I speak to the particular barometer he was looking for. And if anybody stepped outside of the parameters, they were removed.
Okay, so again, just to be clear, so to make sure that we're not going to run around in circles here. So he wasn't like pushing something like specifically about like that was a problem. Like whiteness wasn't like the end thing, right? Like he could say
No,
it wasn't a distancing of whiteness and blackness. It was just like a class thing that he was pushing for, right?
not necessarily. Even in different classes of black people, we still speak a certain way.
Not
It's
always.
that comes down to code switching for the most part.
Not always. There's plenty of well-spoken black people that don't speak
I
AAVE.
don't know any black people that never drop any AVE.
I
I
don't
don't
know any
know any.
white people that never drop any AAVE, but you can say that that's not their typical dialect, right? Of plenty of
So
black
why would it
people.
never come up in the Cosby Show?
Well, because his
Because it's
specific
so
thing,
common.
because it's not real. It's an actual television show, and the goal of his
Mhm.
television show was to show well-spoken, well-to-do, upper-class black people.
So that shows a standard and something that he wants to exclude from his platform.
Something
And
that
if
he
you
wanted
step
to exclude was
outside of that,
improper English, sure,
yes,
and so that's problematic.
in a way, in the sense that he held a high standard for the public image versus his own image versus what he was doing
And now we're moving
behind the
to a
scenes.
different place. Okay, so now if you
Well,
want
this
to
is what we're talking the morality of the man.
No, 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 no. What we were talking about right now was specifically whether or not the show was anti-black or whether or not it was starting to become like whiteness in proximity or something. And of course
No,
now,
the show wasn't anti-black. It was 100% pro-black.
okay, got you. So then we're just we're way past the point now because you're originally trying to say that he was
No, I'm
like he was
speaking
being
of the
more
man's
whiteness.
standards.
No, you weren't. You were talking about where the standards of the show, and you were trying to say that the show was white. You were trying to say that it was like distancing itself from blackness and having some sort of white proximity. Now that we've obviously gotten past that point and recognized that these aspects of culture are not specific or unique to white people, and black people can have those aspects of culture as well. Now we're at the point where we can go ahead and start talking about his character, and those two things are not necessarily what aren't necessarily connected. But we are sure now that that show was not white. It was not anti-black. It wasn't distancing itself from blackness. It was just showing a specific aspect of black culture, just as much as we wouldn't say Good Times wasn't by it showing a specific class of people. We're not going to restrict it and say, well, you never showed any well class or high class black people. No, you have different settings for different show. I'm not going to get mad at, I don't know, Amistad for not showing well spoken black people if this is supposed to be this specific group of individuals. Nor am I going to be mad at Roots if they don't have any Northerners that don't have Southern accents. That's crazy. It's freak to me. Different things have different timepieces and different periods and different things that they want to highlight. And Bill Cosby was just showing upper class, well to do, well spoken, well mannered black people, which those things are not foreign. They are not like they're not a rare occurrence. They're perfectly fine, and that's what he was showing, and as a setting for his show. And I think that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Now, if we want to get
I
into the
think I can
character
give.
of the man, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I think I can give Lethe this one. That he was fighting the juxtaposition of what white America perceived Black America to be, and that could be perceived as a form of whitewashing. Now, I don't necessarily agree, but I think that was the point he was making.
Yeah, but it's
Good
just
point.
wrong again because even fighting
Uh,
against stereotypes doesn't mean that you're whitewashing something.
no.
Fighting stereotypes means that you can just be yourself and highlight some of the
Hmm.
aspects that aren't that. In the same sense, if there was some person that had some sort of prejudice against your behavior, right, and they were saying this person is not well mannered or not well whatever, and so on and so forth, and like that was like the
Yes,
suspicion, and then
yes,
you decided like maybe it was your freaking your mother-in-law like had the belief that you were some slobbing slob dude that doesn't deserve her freaking daughter, and then you decided, no, I'm going to be particularly kempt and particularly well kept while I'm around these people, so that to distance myself from these accusations. You can do that. That's not whitewashing, because in order to whitewash that would mean that all of the things that you're assimilating to are white, and that's not true because well-to-do black people had those. Furthermore, that also furthers the idea that the accusations that they were saying were only black, when a lot of those accusations are just things that happen to do with poverty, but they just like to miscolor them and then to demonize them when they're associated with blackness, and we're not going to do that and further that here, especially not in hindsight. So we're going to say,
words.
got you. So what we're going to say is what he's actually doing, which is highlighting a specific section of blackness, which was perfectly well-founded, which was not something that was whiteness. It was just a specific aspect of blackness, was a setting of his show, which was perfectly fine, and that's what he did. There were black lawyers and black doctors at the time, and that's what he was playing, and that's what his wife was playing. That's it.
This deep and floating to